On Halloween night, the small Spanish village was shrouded in a cloak of mystery and magic. The full moon shone brightly, reflecting its silvery light on the calm surface of the lake, which looked like mirrors of hidden dreams. It was in this enchanted setting that Pato Javier, a curious young boy with bright eyes and an adventurous spirit, decided it was time to explore the Swamp of Enchantments, a place filled with stories his grandmother used to tell with a twinkle in her eye and a hint of fear. Wearing a witch's hat that bobbed on his head and holding a little lantern that cast dancing shadows around him, Javier approached the edge of the swamp. The air was cool, and a gentle breeze whispered secrets in his ears. He paused for a moment, watching the tall trees surrounding the swamp. Their silhouettes rose like silent guardians of the night. "What will I find here?" he murmured to himself, a mix of excitement and nervousness in his voice. Just then, as he stepped on the damp earth, he heard a chorus of frogs singing hypnotic melodies. The notes seemed to float through the air, wrapping around him in a sound embrace. "Wow, this is amazing," Javier exclaimed, enchanted. He couldn't help but feel as if he had stepped into a fairy tale, where reality blended with fantasy. The frogs, with their bright eyes and green skin, seemed to dance in tune with the music echoing through the swamp. However, as he ventured deeper, the stories his grandmother had told began to echo in his mind. He remembered the warnings about a spirit that had cursed the swamp, a being that silenced the animals and spread a cloak of sadness over the place. If only I could learn more about this spirit, maybe I could help, Javier thought, feeling a growing determination in his chest. He recalled his grandmother's words. Courage and curiosity are the keys that unlock the doors of the unknown. With that thought, Javier decided to investigate. He ventured further in, his heart racing with the thrill of discovery. The swamp, with its shadows and mysteries, seemed to whisper to him, inviting him to unravel its secrets. "What else do you hide, Swamp of Enchantments?" he asked aloud, as if expecting the swamp itself to respond. The music of the frogs echoed in his ears, and as he moved, he noticed the mist beginning to form, enveloping the tree trunks and creating a magical yet enigmatic atmosphere. "Maybe I should be more careful," Javier thought, stopping for a moment to observe the dance of the mist. His eyes widened as he saw shapes that seemed to move among the shadows, sending a shiver down his spine. But curiosity was stronger than fear. "If I find the spirit, maybe I can understand why it does this," Javier spoke to himself, his voice steady despite the uncertainties. He felt there was something deeper behind the legend, something that needed to be discovered. With one last look at the shining moon, which seemed to encourage him, he pressed on, ready to face the mysteries that awaited him. Thus, on that Halloween night, Pato Javier, armed with his courage and determination, entered the Swamp of Enchantments, where ancient secrets and magical creatures awaited, ready to reveal the lessons he so eagerly sought. As Javier explored the depths of the Swamp of Enchantments, his senses were heightened, and every sound seemed to tell a story. He moved cautiously, attentive to the shadows dancing in the light of his little lantern. The air was thick with a sweet, damp scent, and the mist began to thicken around him. It was then that he spotted a green, plump figure sitting on a moss-covered stone. It was Don Ramon, the old toad, with his large, wise eyes. "Hello, young adventurer," said Don Ramon, his deep and calm voice echoing in the silence of the swamp. "What brings a boy like you to a place like this?" Javier, surprised and enchanted, replied, "I heard stories about the swamp and its magical creatures. I come in search of mysteries and perhaps a bit of adventure." Don Ramon smiled, his white teeth gleaming in the moonlight. "Ah, stories. This place is filled with them. But be careful, not everything that shines is gold, and not every song is sweet." He paused, looking at Javier with a penetrating gaze. "Do you know that music is the soul of the swamp?" Javier nodded, intrigued. "Listening to the frogs sing, I feel like they have something important to say. But why is music so vital here?" "Music," continued Don Ramon, "is what unites all the beings of this swamp. It brings joy and harmony. However, long ago, A spirit cast a spell over this place, silencing the voices of the creatures and plunging everything into sadness. We sing to maintain peace and happiness, but the mist... He looked toward the horizon, where the fog was gathering. The mist prevents us from living fully. A spirit? Javier asked, his eyes shining with curiosity. What happened to him? Why did he do this? Don Ramon took a deep breath, as if he were about to share a great secret. Ah, my young friend, the spirit was once the guardian of this swamp, but loneliness and neglect turned him into a shadow. He felt forgotten and began to curse the place he once loved. Now he lives in the shadows, and the only way to bring him back into the light is through music and unity. Then, we need to do something, exclaimed Javier, determined. What if we put on a special performance? A song that shows we still care about him. Don Ramon smiled, impressed by the boy's courage. You have a good heart, Javier. But it won't just be the song that makes a difference. We need courage and unity among all the frogs. Each of them has a story, a song that can help illuminate the swamp once again. Javier nodded, thinking about how he could gather all the frogs and create a spectacle that celebrated life and friendship. What do you usually sing at the Halloween festival? He asked, eager to learn more. Oh, each frog has its own song, said Don Ramon, his eyes sparkling. They speak of love, friendship, overcoming challenges, and hope. Each song is a piece of the puzzle that makes up our community. Javier's eyes shone as he imagined the festival. Let's call all the frogs. We need to show the spirit that we still believe in music and joy. Excellent idea, Javier. But remember, it won't be easy. The magical fog has a power that can discourage even the bravest. We will need strength and determination. I won't give up, replied Javier, determination burning within him. Music is powerful, and together we can face any challenge. Don Ramon nodded, satisfied with the boy's resolve. Then let's gather the frogs. They need to know that hope still lives in the heart of each one of us. And so Javier and Don Ramon began to walk through the swamp, ready to gather the frogs and embark on a journey that would lead them to discover that true magic lies in unity and the courage to face challenges, even when the fog seems dense and impenetrable. As Javier and Don Ramon explored the heart of the enchanted swamp, the magical atmosphere around them began to transform. The hypnotic sound of the frogs' songs became a distant echo, smothered by the thickening fog that enveloped everything. Javier looked at the creatures now gathering around him, each with a glimmer of hope in their eyes, but at the same time, a hint of discouragement hung in the air. We need to do something, Don Ramon, Javier exclaimed, his voice firm despite the unease in his heart. If the fog keeps this up, we all risk losing this magic. How can we dispel it? Don Ramon, with his green skin and wrinkles that told stories of ages past, pondered for a moment. My young friend, the fog is a reflection of fear and sadness. We need courage and unity. Only then can we face the spirit that cast this spell. Javier nodded, feeling a fire of determination ignite within him. Then let's come together. Let's show the spirit that we are stronger together. He turned to the frogs, who watched with hopeful yet fearful eyes. Listen, friends, we need all of your voices, your songs. Together we can confront this fog. The frogs began to whisper among themselves, and soon one of them, a frog with large yellow eyes, raised his voice. But what if we don't succeed? What if the fog swallows us? We can't give up before we try, Javier replied, his voice resonating with confidence. Remember, each song you have is a part of you. It's an expression of who we are. If we sing together, perhaps we can show the spirit that music is stronger than fear. Don Ramon, sensing the frog's hesitation, decided to intervene. Each of you has a story, a song that can touch the heart of even the hardest spirit. Let's share these songs. Let's show him the beauty of our unity. With a renewed spark of hope, the frogs began to share their songs. One by one, they lifted their voices, and a soft melody began to float through the air. Each song told a unique story of love, friendship, overcoming, and joy. Javier felt enveloped by the magical energy emanating from his friends, and the sadness that had once hung over the swamp began to dissipate, albeit slowly. As the music echoed, Javier noticed that the fog was still thickening, pressing against them like a heavy blanket. An older frog, with a trembling voice, interrupted the rehearsals. "What if the fog swallows us before we can do anything? What will happen to our songs?" Javier's eyes sparkled with determination. He stood up on a high rock so that everyone could see him. "Listen, I know that the fog is frightening us, but we can't let fear stop us from singing. Remember, music is a light that can shine in the darkness. If we stop now, we will let the spirit win." The frogs looked at one another, their hesitant voices fading, but seeing Javier's courage one by one, they began to agree. "You're right, Javier," said a younger frog, his eyes shining with determination. "Let's continue. We can't give up on our music." With a new spirit of camaraderie, the frogs gathered together, forming a circle around Javier and Don Ramon. The music began again, stronger and more vibrant than before, and Javier joined them, feeling the power of their unity pulse among them. As they sang, Javier looked at the faces of his friends, realizing that they all shared the same desire for freedom and joy. But the fog, like a dark shroud, continued to intensify, threatening to snuff out the light of their voices. Javier's heart tightened as he saw the sadness in the frog's eyes, and he knew he needed to do more. "Don't give up. Let's show the spirit that music is our strength." With those words, Javier felt a wave of courage wash over him. He looked at the frogs and said fervently, "Let's sing with all our souls. Let's show the spirit that music and friendship are more powerful than any spell." Inspired by Javier's words, the frogs lifted their voices and began to sing with all their might. The melody resonated through the swamp, and for a brief moment the mist hesitated, as if it were listening. Javier felt that this was the opportunity they had been waiting for, and he continued to encourage his friends, his voice rising above the notes. Javier was determined to help the frogs of the enchanted swamp dispel the magical fog that threatened to silence their songs. He turned to the frogs gathered in a clearing illuminated by the moonlight. The air was thick with anticipation, and the croaking of the frogs formed a peculiar yet sad symphony. He knew that music was the key to freeing the swamp from the spirit's spell. "We need to do something special," Javier said, breaking the silence that had settled among them. "What if we put on a performance for the spirit, a mix of our songs and a story of overcoming challenges? Who knows, it might move him, and he'll decide to help us." The frogs exchanged confused glances, but the idea of a performance seemed to reignite a small spark of hope. Don Ramon, the wise old frog, scratched his chin with his front foot, pondering. "It's a bold idea, Javier, but what do you have in mind?" "We can tell the story of the swamp, how it used to be a place full of music and joy, and how our unity can bring back that harmony," Javier replied, his enthusiastic voice echoing into the night. The frogs began to murmur among themselves, and soon a chorus of voices rose up. "Yes, let's do it!" They shouted in unison, their eyes shining with the possibility of a new beginning. Javier smiled as he saw their growing excitement. "Great, then let's rehearse," he said, clapping his hands in excitement. "Each of you can choose a song that represents your story, and I'll narrate what happens." With that, the frogs began to share their songs, one after another. There were songs about hope springing forth after the rain, about the beauty of the stars illuminating the darkness, and even about the friendships formed among the most different beings in the swamp. Meanwhile, Javier listened attentively, absorbing the stories and emotions each song conveyed. "This is the song my mother sang to me when I was a tadpole," said a small green frog, her voice trembling with emotion. "She always said that music is what keeps us alive." "And I have a song I learned from my grandfather," added an older frog, his skin marked by time. "It talks about how unity is our strength." As the rehearsals continued, Javier realized that each frog had a unique and valuable story. He stood up, feeling inspired. "You know, I think we need to show the spirit that we're different, but together we are stronger. Diversity matters. Each of you brings something special to this performance." The frogs nodded, and the atmosphere around them began to change. The energy of camaraderie and unity spread through the swamp, even as the mist still hovered above them. However, as the rehearsals progressed, Javier noticed that the fog seemed to intensify, wrapping them in a denser shroud of sadness. "We can't give up now," Javier exclaimed, raising his voice to encourage his friends. "We have to remember why we're doing this. We have to show the spirit that music still lives within us." The frogs, initially disheartened, began to lift their spirits. "You're right, Javier," shouted one of them, renewed determination in his voice. "Let's show the spirit that music is more powerful than any spell." "Yes," they shouted in unison, ready to face the challenge ahead. Javier smiled, filled with hope and courage, eager for the performance that lay ahead. The night of the festival was approaching, and he knew that if they united, they could make magic happen. As the night wore on in the enchanted swamp, the atmosphere was charged with emotion and expectation. Javier, wrapped in his cloak and with a flickering lantern in hand, watched as the frogs settled down. The songs that once echoed through the swamp now seemed to fade away before the thickening mist that was intensifying. The joy that filled the air began to be threatened by a shadow of discouragement. "Look at the mist!" exclaimed Javier, his heart racing as the fog enveloped the frogs like a dark cloak. "If we continue like this, the festival won't be the celebration we hoped for." One by one, the frogs lowered their heads, their voices silenced by sadness. The chorus that once resonated with cheerful melodies was now becoming a whisper of insecurity. Don Ramon, the wise old frog, looked at Javier with a worried expression. "The mist is thickening, my young friend. We need courage and unity to face it. If we don't come together, we will lose our joy." Javier stood up, feeling a wave of determination flow through his body. "We can't give up." His voice echoed through the swamp, causing some frogs to lift their heads in his direction. "Remember what music represents. It's our strength, our friendship. If we unite, we can conquer this mist." "But what if we can't?" questioned one of the frogs, his voice trembling. "What if the spirit continues to silence us?" "We need to try," Javier replied, his eyes shining with a mix of courage and hope. "If we come together and show the spirit that we are stronger together, maybe he will remember what joy is. Let's create a special performance, one that showcases not just our songs but also our stories." The frogs began to murmur among themselves, ideas coming to life in their minds. "A performance?" repeated Don Ramon, his expression lighting up. "A way to express our unity and courage. This could touch the spirit's heart." "Exactly," Javier confirmed, looking at each of them. "Each of you has a unique story. Let's share this through music. We can show the spirit that we are a community, that we are not afraid, and that joy is worth fighting for." As the frogs perked up at the suggestion, Javier noticed the atmosphere shifting. Sadness began to give way to a spirit of camaraderie. "Let's rehearse," he suggested, clapping his hands to get everyone's attention. "Each song should be special and reflect our hopes and dreams. We need all the voices." The frogs gathered, forming a large circle, and began to share their songs. Each melody carried a touch of hope and friendship, and the energy in the air began to vibrate. Javier felt a part of that magic, as if each frog was sharing not just a song, but a piece of their soul. The sounds intertwined, creating a harmony that made Javier's heart race. "I never knew music could be so powerful," he murmured, feeling inspired. "Each of you is special, and together we are an unstoppable force. Let's show the spirit that our unity is stronger than the fog." But the fog continued to thicken, threatening to engulf what had been built. Javier realized that the frogs, despite their efforts, were starting to lose heart again. He stood up, the burning desire to encourage them igniting in his chest. "We can't give up now," he shouted, his voice resonating with fervor. "Let's remember what this means. Each song, each story is a part of us. If we let the fog defeat us, we allow fear to take over our hearts. But what if the fog engulfs us? one frog questioned, their voice hesitant. What if it doesn't let the festival happen? Another added, visibly worried. Javier took a deep breath. If we believe we are stronger together, we can face any challenge. Music is our light. Let's use it to dispel this darkness. We need to do this not just for ourselves, but for everyone who loves this swamp. A silence fell over the group, but the eyes of each frog began to slowly shine with the spark of hope. In that moment, Javier knew that the battle against the fog would not be easy, but he was ready to fight alongside his friends, confident that true magic lies in courage and unity. Javier cautiously moved into the densest part of the enchanted swamp. The fog enveloped everything around him, creating a shroud of mystery and uncertainty. He felt a chill down his spine, but determination pulsed in his heart. The voices of the frogs echoed in the distance, a constant reminder that he was not alone. As he approached the center of the swamp, where the fog seemed thickest, he saw a shadow contorting among the twisted trees and bushes. With his chest racing, Javier took a deep breath and called out, "Spirit, I know you're here. I am Javier, and I've come to find you." The shadow hesitated but did not move. Realizing the spirit's reluctance, Javier decided to get closer. With each step he took, the fog seemed to thicken, as if trying to prevent him from moving forward. Yet curiosity and compassion propelled him. "I don't want to hurt you," Javier continued, trying to sound as gentle as possible. "I came to understand your pain. Why have you cursed the swamp and silenced the songs?" Finally, the figure began to materialize, revealing an ethereal and sorrowful being, with eyes reflecting profound loneliness. The spirit looked at Javier, and a look of distrust crossed its face. "You wouldn't understand," the spirit murmured, its voice echoing like a whisper lost in the mist. Javier felt a tightening in his heart upon hearing those words. He remembered the stories his grandmother told about lonely spirits, and a deep empathy enveloped him. "Please, try to tell me," Javier insisted, moving even closer. "I want to hear your story. I want to understand." The spirit hesitated, as if the reluctance to share its pain was a barrier it couldn't cross. But the sincerity in Javier's eyes seemed to touch it somehow. It finally spoke, its voice laden with melancholy. "I was forgotten. Once I was the guardian of this place, loved and respected. But over time, people stopped coming to the swamp. They feared what they didn't understand, and I became a legend, a scary tale to frighten children. Now, I'm just a shadow, feared and isolated." Javier listened attentively, his heart aching with the sadness that seeped through the spirit's words. He realized that the fog covering the swamp was not just a spell, but also a reflection of the spirit's loneliness. "You don't need to be feared," Javier said, trying to offer comfort. "The music the frogs sing is full of love and friendship. They have hope, even amidst the fog. You can be part of that too." The spirit looked at Javier, its eyes still filled with distrust, but a flicker of curiosity emerged. "How can you be sure that music is not just a reminder of what I've lost?" it questioned, its voice trembling. "Because music is a bond that unites us all," Javier replied, his voice firm yet gentle. "I've been in the swamp and witnessed the beauty that exists here, even with the fog. Everyone, including you, deserves to be celebrated, not feared. Unity is more powerful than fear." The spirit fell silent, considering Javier's words. The young man felt that he had touched a part of the spirit's heart, a part that perhaps still longed to be understood and accepted. "You don't have to live in the shadows. Come to the festival and sing with us," Javier proposed, feeling a wave of courage. "You can be part of the joy." But the spirit remained hesitant, the pain still reflected in its gaze. Javier, sensing the internal struggle of the spirit, decided he needed to dig deeper. "Imagine how beautiful it would be, a song that would unite us all, where you could finally let go of the resentment and be welcomed instead of feared. What do you think?" The spirit looked at Javier, its expression still uncertain. But something in the young man's words seemed to spark a glimmer of hope, a possibility of redemption. The spirit hesitated, its nebulous form trembling under the moonlight. Javier, with his heart racing, observed the sadness and loneliness that lingered over the ethereal figure. He stepped closer, his words cutting through the heavy silence of the swamp. "I know you feel alone," Javier said, his voice steady yet gentle. "But music has the power to unite even the most distant hearts." The spirit, shrouded in an aura of melancholy, stared intently at the young man. "Music? What do I know about music? I have been forgotten, feared. No one cares about what I feel." Its voice was a sad whisper, like the wind passing through the branches of the trees. Javier took a deep breath, feeling the connection to the spirit's pain. "But you don't have to be feared. You can be celebrated. What happened to you isn't your fault. I want you to come to the festival. The frogs are ready to sing and celebrate life. They have stories to tell, and if you join us, perhaps you can hear theirs too." The spirit hesitated, its face still burdened with distrust. "What if the music doesn't change anything? What if I just bring more sadness to them?" Javier stepped forward, determined. Music has the power to transform. It can heal wounds and unite hearts. I've seen it happen with the frogs. They fear you, but they also have hope. If you allow yourself, you could be part of something wonderful. The moonlight reflected in the spirit's eyes, and Javier noticed a small spark of curiosity. "Do you really believe this can work?" it asked, its voice softer now. "Yes, I believe," Javier replied. "Music is made of feelings, and feelings are what make us human or spiritual. Come listen to their song, you might be surprised." The spirit considered Javier's words. The idea of being welcomed and understood was tempting, but the fear of rejection still held it captive. "What if I show myself and they still fear me?" it questioned, vulnerability exposed in its voice. "You won't know until you try," said Javier encouragingly. "Music is an invitation. It asks you to join the celebration of life, not fear. Give yourself a chance, at least for one night." Finally, the spirit sighed, a cloud of sadness dissipating around it. "All right, I'll listen, but I don't promise anything," it said, reluctant but with a faint sign of hope. Javier smiled, relieved. "That's all I ask. Let's go back and sing together. The frogs are waiting." With an inviting gesture, Javier began walking back, and the spirit hesitated for a moment before following him. As they approached the group, the sound of the frogs' songs grew louder, engaging and welcoming. Javier turned to the spirit, which now floated a bit closer to him. "When we arrive, you can introduce yourself however you like. No one needs to know who you were before. Just be yourself." When they finally reached the festival site, Javier turned to the frogs, his voice filled with emotion. "Friends, I found someone who would like to join us tonight. He has a story to tell, and I ask that you all welcome him with love." The frogs stopped singing, their eyes sparkling with curiosity. The spirit hesitated, but Javier's words encouraged it. It stepped forward a bit, its form still nebulous, but now softer. "I am a spirit that has been forgotten," it began, its voice echoing among the frogs. "I feared rejection and kept my distance, but I heard your music and I feel that perhaps I can be part of this." Javier, standing beside the spirit, smiled encouragingly. "Now let's sing together. Show him how music can unite us all." With that, the frogs began to sing their songs, each resonating with love and acceptance. Javier joined them, his heart beating with joy and hope. As the music spread through the swamp, the spirit felt the fog of sadness around it starting to lift. The swamp, once cloaked in dense, oppressive mist, now pulsed with vibrant energy as the hesitant spirit joined the frogs. The music echoing through the air was a gentle melody filled with hope and acceptance. Javier, sitting at the center of the circle formed by the creatures, watched with wide eyes as the spirit began to move slowly, as if learning to dance again after years of forgetting. "Sing along with us," called one of the frogs, its melodious voice standing out among the others. The spirit hesitated, but the music enveloped it like a warm embrace. "We just want to celebrate. Come on, it's your turn." The spirit, now a bit more illuminated, looked at the frogs, and for the first time a shy smile appeared on its somber face. "To sing? I didn't know it was still possible. It's so beautiful," it murmured, its voice low and filled with emotion. Javier noticed that the spirit's presence, initially intimidating, was transforming into something gentler and more welcoming. He stood up and, with an animated gesture, encouraged everyone to join the spirit. "Come on, everyone! Music is stronger when we share our voices." The frogs, bursting with enthusiasm, began to chant their songs, each carrying the essence of love and acceptance. The melody intertwined, creating a harmony that reverberated throughout the swamp. As they sang, the fog around them began to dissipate, revealing the hidden charms of the place. The vibrant colors of the vegetation and flowers started to shine, as if the swamp itself was awakening from a long slumber. "Look, the swamp is changing," exclaimed a frog, his eyes shining with joy. "The music is bringing life back." Indeed, as the song echoed, magical creatures that had been hidden began to appear. Butterflies with iridescent wings danced in the air, and tiny fairies of light flickered like stars, joining in the celebration. The swamp, once a place of sadness and solitude, was transforming into a spectacle of joy. "This is the true magic of the swamp," shouted Don Ramon, his voice filled with pride and emotion. "Music and friendship can heal even the deepest wounds." The spirit, now enveloped by the frog's song, began to move with more confidence. He joined the chorus, his dark voice blending with the vibrant melodies. I didn't know it was possible to feel so much happiness. Thank you for not fearing me," he said, his voice now stronger and clearer. With each note, the fog continued to lift, and the swamp was filled with light. The frogs, Javier and the spirit sang together, creating a bond that transcended any barriers that fear had built. Javier felt the warmth of friendship and acceptance wrapping around him like a comforting cloak. "This is just the beginning," Javier declared, looking into the spirit's eyes. "Together we can make the swamp a place of happiness and celebration forever." "Yes," replied the spirit, now glowing with joy. "Music has united our hearts, and together we will keep this magic alive." As they continued to sing, the atmosphere of the swamp transformed into a true spectacle of colors and lights. The magical creatures danced, and the frogs leaped in celebration, creating waves of joy that spread throughout the area. The swamp, once shrouded in mystery and sorrow, was now a place of unity, friendship, and celebration of life. And so, under the light of the full moon, Javier and his new friends experienced the true essence of magic, which blossomed in the heart of each of them. The festival in the Swamp of Enchantments had turned into a vibrant celebration, where frogs, magical creatures, and even the spirit, who once hid in the shadows, joined together in a display of joy and unity. The air was filled with music and laughter, and the light of the full moon illuminated every corner of the swamp, making the waters reflect a dazzling display of colors. Javier watched it all with a radiant smile on his face. He felt he had done something significant, something that not only changed his life, but also the lives of all those who inhabited that magical place. By his side, Don Ramon, the wise old frog, looked at him with pride. "You did more than just help, boy," said Don Ramon, his gaze heavy with admiration. "You brought hope back to the swamp." "I only did what I thought was right," Javier replied a bit shyly. "Music is a powerful language. It unites everyone, even those who feel lonely." As the frogs continued to sing, their harmonious voices echoing through the swamp, a large green frog, perhaps the eldest of the group, approached and said, "Javier, you have become a true friend of the Swamp of Enchantments. I will never forget how you faced the spirit and united us." "That's true," exclaimed a little frog with bright eyes. "Without you, we would still be trapped in the sadness of the fog." Hearing these words, Javier felt his heart warm. He had never imagined that an adventure on a Halloween night could result in something so grand. "But it was the courage of all of you that made this happen," he replied, gesturing to the frogs dancing joyfully around him. The frogs nodded enthusiastically, and Don Ramon spoke again. "Every song you heard tonight carries a part of our stories. Music is not just entertainment, it is the soul of our home, and you, Javier, helped to revive it." Amidst the celebration, Javier noticed that the fog had dissipated in a nearly magical way. The colors of the swamp, once dull, now shone brightly, reflecting a rainbow of emotions. Creatures that had long disappeared began to reappear, bringing with them an air of renewal and hope. "Look!" shouted a smaller frog, pointing to the sky. "The lights are dancing. It's as if the swamp is celebrating with us." Everyone looked up and saw tiny sparks of light gently floating down, like stars descending to join the party. Javier felt a wave of emotion seeing the joy on the faces of his new friends. "Let's sing together," announced Don Ramon, raising his paws, "a song of friendship and acceptance." The frogs organized themselves in a circle, and Javier, filled with excitement, joined them. "1, 2, and 3, he shouted, and everyone began to sing in unison. Their voices intertwined, creating a melody that seemed to vibrate with the very essence of the swamp. "When the music touches our hearts, sadness fades away," sang the frogs, their voices echoing through the swamp. Javier could hardly believe what was happening. He felt a deep connection with all those magical creatures. The words of the song resonated inside him, and he realized that the true magic wasn't in the creatures or the enchantments, but in the bond he had formed with those who were so different from him. When the song came to an end, everyone applauded and embraced, celebrating the new friendship that had emerged. Javier looked around, his eyes shining with happiness. He knew that the Halloween night had become a landmark in his life, not just for the adventure, but for the understanding he had gained about acceptance and friendship. "Thank you, Javier," said Don Ramon, his voice thick with emotion. "You are a true hero of the swamp. The music has reunited us, and we will never forget what you did." "This is just the beginning," Javier replied, feeling that the real adventure was only starting. He knew that no matter where life took him, he would always have a home in the enchanted swamp and friends who would support him on any journey. Javier looked around, admiring the magical transformation that had taken over the enchanted swamp. Vibrant colors danced under the full moon, and music echoed like a symphony of joy. He was about to say goodbye to his new friends, but before he could take a step, the spirit, now revealed in all its radiant glory, approached him. "Javier," the spirit said in a soft, melodic voice, "you are not only a brave young man, but also a true friend. Your willingness to listen and understand has touched me in ways I never thought possible. Long ago, I was the guardian of this swamp, but a curse turned me into a shadow of what I used to be." Javier frowned, confused. "You were the guardian? But what happened? Why were you cursed?" The spirit sighed, a gentle breeze accompanying its lament. "I was forgotten by those I protected. Loneliness consumed me, and in my despair I cast a spell to silence the music and joy. I believed that this would shield me from the pain of being ignored. However, what I did not realize was that this choice only brought more sadness to the swamp and to myself." Javier felt a wave of compassion for that sad spirit. "But you don't have to be alone anymore. Look around you. Everyone is here to celebrate life and music. You can be part of it again. We accept you." The spirit hesitated, its eyes shimmering with a mix of hope and fear. "Do you really think I can be accepted again? What if I bring the shadow back?" "No," Javier replied firmly. "The music we heard tonight is stronger than any shadow. It is made of love and friendship. Together we can create a new story for this swamp, one where everyone is welcome." With a gentle gesture, the spirit raised its hand, and in a magical instant, the mist began to dissipate even further. "So you offer me a chance for redemption? To return to what I once was?" "Yes," shouted Javier, fueled by emotion. "Come sing with us. Show the world that you are more than a shadow." The spirit looked at the frogs, who were now watching it with hope and curiosity. In a hesitant movement, it joined Javier, and together they returned to the heart of the swamp. When Javier turned to the frogs, he said, "Friends, this is the guardian of the swamp. He wishes to join us." The frogs, initially apprehensive, soon began to sing a song about acceptance and leaving the past behind. Their voices intertwined in soft harmonies, and a wave of magical light began to emanate from all sides. The spirit, now more visible and full of life, started to move to the rhythm of the melody, its eyes shining with newfound joy. I feel something different," said the spirit, its voice now filled with emotion. "The music, it's like a hug I didn't know I needed." As the festival continued, the mist finally cleared, revealing a starry sky shining down on the swamp. The frogs danced and sang, and the spirit joined them, its presence now filled with light. The swamp, once shrouded in shadows, now glowed with vibrant colors, reflecting the joy of all the beings present. Javier watched the scene, his heart overflowing with happiness. He knew he had done something truly special. The spirit, now freed from its sorrow, looked at Javier with gratitude. "You brought the light back to me and to the swamp. You have become a friend not only to the frogs, but also to me. From now on, whenever the music echoes here, it will be a celebration of our union." At that moment, the spirit made a magical gesture, and the mist transformed into a dazzling display of twinkling lights, illuminating the entire swamp like a starry sky. Javier looked up at the heavens, feeling that, in some way, he too had become part of that magic. As the creatures danced and celebrated, he knew he would never forget that magical night. As he prepared to head home, the spirit approached him once more. "You will always have a special place in this swamp, Javier. Whenever you need friendship or courage, know that you can return. And may the music never cease to play in your heart." With a smile, Javier said goodbye to his friends, feeling not just like a young adventurer, but like a true guardian of the swamp, carrying with him the lessons of courage, friendship, and the beauty of acceptance. Though one tale has come to a close, the night still has more magic to share. Javier, a young falcon with golden feathers and a curious gaze, perched high on a branch of an ancient tree, his eyes fixed on the sky. He watched the older birds dance in the air currents, showcasing a grace he had yet to acquire. The morning sun filtered through the leaves, illuminating the scenery of the Galician forest, and the wind whispered secrets that only the most experienced seemed to understand. "One day, I will be like them," Javier murmured, his voice filled with determination. But deep down, he felt a rising frustration. Despite his burning desire to fly and hunt, there was a persistent sense that something was missing. He flapped his wings vigorously, but couldn't reach the elegance he admired in his idols. "Why can't I?" he thought, feeling the weight of insecurity. Then, amid his musings, Javier spotted an imposing figure perched on a lower branch. An owl with deep brown feathers, Inez, watched him with a penetrating gaze. Her large, wise eyes seemed to hold the stories of many moons. Javier felt a flutter of excitement mixed with nervousness. He approached, curious. "Why do you watch me, wise Inez?" he asked, his words tinged with timidity. "Because I see in you a young one full of potential, but also a restless heart," Inez replied, her voice soft as the wind. "You wish to fly like the elders, but you do not yet understand what it takes to become a great hunter." "I want to learn. I want to be strong and fearless," Javier exclaimed, his feathers shining with the intensity of his passion. "But what is missing in me?" Inez landed closer, her eyes never leaving the young falcon. "You lack patience, young one. Strength is not just about speed or agility. It's about understanding the cycles of nature, about respecting every creature that inhabits this forest. You must learn to listen." Javier furrowed his brow, confused. "Listen? What does that have to do with flying and hunting?" "Everything," said Inez with a slight nod. "Nature speaks in subtle ways. Every sound, every movement has a meaning. If you do not learn to listen, your wings will not be enough to guide you." The young falcon hesitated. The idea of learning to listen seemed distant and abstract. "But what if I can't? What if I don't know how to listen?" His voice trembled with doubt. "You will never know unless you try," Inez replied, a gentle smile forming on her beak. "Come, I invite you to accompany me. Together we will explore the forest. Learning to listen is an essential step toward true power." Javier felt warmth grow in his heart. Curiosity overcame fear, and he nodded, resolute. "I accept the challenge, Inez. I want to learn." "Then let's begin," said the owl, her wings opening majestically. "The forest is full of teachings, and you, my young falcon, are about to discover a world that goes beyond what you can imagine." With that, Javier followed Inez, his wings beating with enthusiasm. The forest seemed to vibrate around him, full of sounds and movements he had never noticed before. He was about to embark on a journey that would not only change his hunting skills, but also his perspective on life and nature. And as they flew together, Javier felt that he was finally on the right path to becoming the great hunter he had always dreamed of being. The soft sunlight filtered through the dense leaves of the Galician forest, creating a mosaic of shadows and glimmers that danced on the moss-covered ground. Javier, the young falcon, followed Inez, the wise owl, with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. He had never seen this place before. Here, the trees intertwined in a magical way, forming a natural shelter that pulsed with the life of the forest. "This is a special place, Javier," Inez said, her voice gentle and serene. "Here, you will learn to listen to nature." Javier looked around, fascinated. "Listen to nature? How can I do that?" Inez landed on a low branch, her large, deep-set eyes fixed on the young falcon. "Nature speaks in many ways. The sounds, the movements, even silence has meaning. You just need to be attentive." He leaned closer, eager to understand. "But what if I can't? What if I get distracted?" "That is part of the learning," Inez replied with a smile at the corner of her beak. "Patience is a virtue you must cultivate. Let's start with something simple. Close your eyes and take a deep breath." Javier hesitated but then obeyed. He closed his eyes and let his breathing calm him. The sound of the wind whispering through the leaves and the distant song of a bird began to fill his being. He felt more connected, as if the forest had begun to speak to him. "Now listen," said Inez. "What do you feel?" I hear the wind. And the birds," Javier replied, opening his eyes, a spark of excitement in his gaze. "But is that all?" "No, dear Javier. Pay attention to what is beyond the sounds. What do you see? How do the creatures around you move?" Javier looked more closely. He noticed a family of rabbits hiding under a bush, their eyes alert and ears upright. Further ahead, a deer grazed peacefully, its movements graceful and careful. "The rabbits seem nervous, and the deer, it looks calm but alert." "Exactly," Inez exclaimed, encouraging him. "Each animal has its own way of dealing with the world. Now, let's try something more challenging." With an elegant movement of her feathers, Inez led Javier to an open field where they could observe the deer more closely. "Follow me, but make no sudden movements. Let's see if we can get closer to him." Javier nodded, determination growing within him. They crouched down, sliding slowly across the ground covered in dry leaves. Javier struggled to contain his excitement, but suddenly a branch snapped under his claws. "Javier!" Inez whispered, her voice a mix of concern and reproach. "Remember what you learned. Patience." The deer, alarmed, lifted its head and bolted away, disappearing among the trees. Javier felt frustrated and discouraged. "I can't do this. I'm a failure." Inez landed beside him, her eyes filled with understanding. "Don't get discouraged, my young friend. Learning to listen to nature and respect its inhabitants takes time. How did you feel when the deer ran away?" "Frustration," Javier replied, his voice low. "I just wanted to get closer to it." Frustration is part of learning, but it shouldn't be the end. Instead of letting it overwhelm you, see it as a lesson. The deer was on alert because it didn't know your intentions. Trust takes time to build. "So, what should I do?" Javier asked, his determination starting to resurface. "Practice patience and observation," Inez advised. "Try again, But this time, do it differently. Learn to move like the wind and blend into your surroundings. That way, you will become a part of it. Javier nodded, determined to improve. He knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but with Inez by his side, he felt he had a chance to become the falcon he always dreamed of being. The sky in Galicia was beginning to darken, and heavy clouds were gathering on the horizon, heralding the first storm of autumn. The wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the trees and bringing with it the damp smell of the earth. Javier, still unsure and anxious, felt an unease in the air. He looked at Inez, the owl, who remained serene on her branch, watching the change in the weather with a keen, deep gaze. "This storm is approaching fast, Inez," Javier said, nervously flapping his wings. "What are we going to do?" Inez slowly turned her head, her yellow eyes shining with wisdom. "Javier, the storm is a natural part of life. Just as birds find shelter and trees bend, we too must learn to adapt to these changes." The young falcon frowned, confused. "But what if the storm is too strong? What if I can't fly against the winds?" "That's exactly what we need to observe," Inez replied, her voice calm like the breeze before a storm. "Every creature in the forest has a way of dealing with difficulties. Resilience is key to survival. Come, let's move to a safer place and watch." Together, they flew to a more sheltered spot where the trees formed a thick barrier against the wind. Inez perched on a sturdy branch, and Javier followed, feeling the tree tremble under the wind's force. He looked around and saw birds taking cover, their feathers ruffled, and others joining in flocks, seeking safety in numbers. "Look how they organize themselves," said Inez, pointing with her beak to a group of birds huddling in a limited space between the trunks. "They know that together they are stronger. Unity is a form of resilience." "But what if I don't know how to join them? What if I fail?" Javier asked, frustration creeping into his voice. Inez moved closer and gently touched Javier's wing with the tip of her beak. "Everyone has their doubts, Javier. The important thing is not to let fear stop you from acting. Remember, even the strongest need support, and that's not a sign of weakness, but of wisdom." The young falcon watched the other birds, feeling a mix of admiration and insecurity. "I want to be strong like them, but it seems so difficult." "Being strong doesn't mean being fearless. It means having the courage to face your fears and learn from them," Inez replied. "Now, pay attention to nature. Listen to the sounds around you. Each animal has its own way of communicating and preparing for what's to come." Javier closed his eyes and focused. The sound of the wind rustling through the leaves, the distant calls of deer, and the flapping of bird wings formed a symphony that slowly began to reveal its meanings. He realized that the forest was alive, vibrating in harmony even in the face of the impending storm. "I can hear it," he exclaimed, opening his eyes with renewed brightness. "The birds are warning each other about the storm, and the deer are calling to one another." "Exactly, Javier. Nature speaks, and those who listen learn to prepare. Now tell me, what would you do if you were in their place?" I would gather everyone and look for a safe place," Javier replied, feeling confidence begin to bloom within him. "Yes, and that is true strength," said Inez, proud. "The ability to guide and protect others. You are learning, but there is still a way to go. Let's observe a bit longer." Javier, now more attentive, looked at the forest with a new understanding. He saw the birds clustering together, the deer moving calmly, and the trees gracefully bending to the wind. The storm was coming, but instead of fear, he felt a deep connection with everything around him. It was as if the forest was teaching him the importance of resilience and unity. The storm approached rapidly, wrapped in dark clouds that covered the blue sky of Galicia. Javier, the young falcon, felt the change in the air. The wind blew fiercely, and the branches of the trees swayed wildly. He was flying low, trying to find shelter, when he spotted something that made him hesitate. In a thorny bush, a small goldfinch struggled to free itself, its bright yellow feathers shining even under the storm's threatening shadow. "Oh no, what do I do now?" Javier thought, a mix of worry and fear flooding his chest. He had never faced a situation like this before, and the idea of risking himself to help another bird made him nervous. The instinct for survival screamed in his mind, warning him of the approaching storm. He hesitated, his wings almost coming to a stop in the air. What if a predator shows up? What if the storm catches me on the way? Meanwhile, Inez, the wise owl, watched from afar. With her large, round, deep eyes, she captured every movement of the young hawk. The concern in her gaze was not for the storm, but for what Javier would choose to do. In a moment of silence, she approached, her white feathers contrasting with the darkness that loomed. With a soft and encouraging voice, she said, "Javier, true strength is not just in flying high or hunting skillfully. Sometimes true courage is helping the most vulnerable." Javier turned to Inez, her words echoing in his mind. "But Inez, what if I get hurt? What if the goldfinch can't escape?" "I'm scared," he said, his voice trembling. The weight of responsibility felt crushing, and the storm was now roaring, seeming to push him to make a decision. Inez landed beside him, her wings slightly open as if she wanted to embrace him. "I understand your fear, Javier. We all feel it at some point. But you must remember that nature is a cycle of giving and receiving. If you don't help, the goldfinch could be swept away by the storm. Remember what you learned about resilience. Sometimes you need to take a risk to make a difference." Inez's words penetrated Javier's mind, and he began to ponder. He looked at the goldfinch, which continued to struggle, its small eyes filled with despair. The sight of the trapped bird in distress struck a chord within him. Courage began to blossom in his heart, and he realized that the life of the goldfinch was in his wings. "You're right, Inez. I will help him," Javier declared, determination growing in his voice. He cautiously approached the bush, his talons preparing to cut the thorns that imprisoned the small bird. "Calm down, little friend. I'm here to help," he murmured softly, so as not to scare him further. With a precise strike, Javier managed to free the goldfinch. The bird, initially dazed, looked at the hawk with gratitude in its eyes. "Thank you. I thought I would be stuck forever," said the goldfinch, its feathers now loose and vibrant. Javier felt a warmth in his chest as he watched the goldfinch fly freely, escaping the bush. "You're safe now. Go. Find shelter," shouted Javier as he watched the small bird soar away, its wings beating with gratitude. Inez landed next to Javier, a proud smile shining on her face. "You were brave, Javier. What you did today is a true example of strength and compassion. You helped a vulnerable being in a moment of crisis." Javier, still breathless, felt a new connection with the forest around him. "I never thought that helping could make me feel so good, Inez. Thank you for encouraging me. I understand now that true strength comes from caring for one another." With a sparkle in her eyes, Inez looked toward the horizon, where the storm still rumbled. But now Javier felt ready to face any challenge that came, not just for himself, but for all those who needed help. After the storm, the forest appeared transformed, as if nature had undergone a magical change. The broken branches and leaves scattered on the ground told the story of the wind's fury, while the rain still trickled gently down the tree trunks. Javier, the young hawk, flew low, admiring the scene around him. The sunlight began to break through the clouds, casting golden rays that illuminated the remnants of the storm. Javier landed on a high branch and observed the other animals of the forest gathering. Some were helping to remove fallen branches, while others were striving to find shelter amid the chaos. He realized that everyone was working together, and a sense of belonging began to grow within him. Inez, the wise owl, watched from afar, her attentive eyes and a slight smile on her face. "Look, Javier," said Inez, calling him with a wing gesture. "See how the animals have come together? This is how the community strengthens after a crisis." Javier tilted his head, intrigued. "But what can I do? I'm just a young hawk. I can't carry trees like the deer or clean nests like the swallows." Inez flew to him and landed by his side. True strength doesn't come only from physical abilities, but from the willingness to help and collaborate. Everyone, even the smallest, has a role to play. What do you think about starting right here? Javier looked around and saw a group of rabbits trying to move a heavy branch that was blocking the entrance to their burrow. He hesitated, but determination began to blossom within him. "You're right, Inez. I will help them." And with that, he quickly descended to the rabbits. "Hey friends, can I help you?" exclaimed Javier, landing on the ground. The rabbits looked at him surprised. "Oh, Javier, that would be great. This branch is too heavy," said one of the rabbits, named Tico, who was panting from effort. With decisive movement, Javier positioned himself next to them and, with his sharp talons, began to pull the branch. "Let's do it together. 1, 2, 3, he shouted, and the rabbits joined forces, pushing and pulling until the branch finally moved, clearing the entrance to the burrow. "We did it!" shouted Tico, jumping for joy. "Thank you so much, Javier. You were amazing." Javier felt warmth in his chest at the words of gratitude. "It was nothing. I just did what I could," he replied modestly, but his heart beat stronger, filled with satisfaction. Inez watched the scene with pride. "See how collaboration makes a difference, Javier. Every little effort counts. Now why don't you invite others to join us?" Javier turned to the other animals working nearby. "Everyone, let's come together to help clean the forest. Together, we can achieve so much more." Inspired by the young falcon's initiative, the animals began to gather around him. The swallows flew in circles, singing cheerfully, and soon everyone was working together. Javier guided those around him, coordinating efforts so that each could contribute with their unique skills. "Let's clear the branches from the paths and rebuild the nests that were damaged," suggested one of the swallows, and everyone enthusiastically agreed. As they worked, Javier noticed how the forest, even after the storm, was full of life and beauty. He felt part of something greater, a community united by a common purpose. Laughter and sounds of mutual assistance echoed through the forest, and the sense of camaraderie grew with each moment. Amid this new energy, Javier looked at Inez, who watched everything with a serene gaze and smiled. "I'm learning that we are stronger together, aren't we, Inez?" "Yes, Javier. Unity is a powerful force. And you, my young one, are becoming a true leader," replied Inez, her eyes shining with pride. The forest, though marked by the storm, was beginning to recover, and the friendship among the animals strengthened with every step taken together. Javier now understood that true greatness was not just in his hunting skills, but in the ability to unite and help others, a lesson he would carry with him forever. As the seasons passed, Javier transformed from an insecure young falcon into a respected helper among the animals of the forest. He applied in his daily actions the lessons that Inez, the wise owl, had taught him. When the sun rose on the horizon, Javier ventured through the forest, attentive to every sound, every movement. He didn't just fly, he flew with purpose. One morning, while exploring a sunlit clearing, Javier spotted a group of young birds that seemed to be in trouble. The little creatures, with their feathers still developing, chirped anxiously, flying in circles, unsure how to navigate an increasingly hostile environment. Intrigued, Javier approached, his wings beating gently, and asked, "What happened, little friends?" One of the young birds, a yellow canary, replied with a trembling voice, "We're trapped here. A wild cat is lurking and we can't get out safely." Fear was palpable in the canary's voice, and Javier felt a wave of concern. He remembered what Inez always said, "True strength lies in protecting the vulnerable." With a newfound sense of responsibility, Javier assessed the situation. The cat, a cunning and stealthy predator, was hiding behind a bush, watching the birds with hungry eyes. Javier knew he needed to act quickly. "Stay calm. I'll think of something," he said, trying to convey confidence. As the canaries continued to chirp nervously, Javier began to devise a plan. He would fly high, drawing the cat's attention away from the young birds. Remembering his lessons from Inez, he knew that a direct attack could be dangerous, but a strategic move could save the day. He looked at the young canaries and said, "When I say so, you must fly as fast as you can to that bush over there. As soon as I distract the cat, it will be your chance to escape." The canaries, though terrified, nodded with determination. Javier took a deep breath, feeling adrenaline coursing through his feathers. He quickly ascended into the sky, his wings slicing through the air with grace. From above, he saw the cat crouched, ready to pounce. "Now!" shouted Javier, diving toward the feline. He made a swift and bold move, swooping down toward the cat, which immediately looked up, surprised. "Hey you, mischievous cat, up here!" Javier shouted, his voice ringing through the clearing. The cat, intrigued and irritated, turned toward him, its hunting instincts awakened. Seizing the moment, Javier began to fly in circles, performing acrobatic maneuvers to grab the predator's attention even more. The cat, unable to resist the movement, followed Javier with its eyes, completely forgetting about the canaries. "That's right, come try to catch me," Javier taunted as he quickly flew away, leading the cat further from the clearing. With the cat distracted, the young canaries, following Javier's instructions, flew toward the safe bush. Adrenaline pulsed through Javier as he watched the birds move in unison, their little wings flapping as one. "You made it! Keep going!" he encouraged them. Finally, after a few tense minutes, Javier saw the cat give up and wander off, annoyed by its failed hunt. He landed on a nearby branch, watching the canaries gather safely. "You're safe now," he exclaimed, his heart still racing. "You are amazing, Javier," said the yellow canary, its eyes shining with gratitude. "I don't know what we would have done without you." Javier smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. "It was a team effort. Always remember that unity is our strength. If you ever need help again, I'll be around." As the young birds expressed their thanks, Javier reflected on what he had learned from Inés. It wasn't just about flying or hunting, it was about protecting and caring, about being part of something greater. And, in that moment, he knew he was ready to face any challenge the forest might present. Javier, now more mature and confident, felt the cool wind beneath his wings as he soared high above the treetops. The sensation of freedom was indescribable, and each beat of his wings echoed the joy of his accomplishments. He remembered Inés's lessons about the importance of patience and the wisdom of nature. "It's time to fly alone," he thought, a radiant smile on his falcon face. As he explored the skies, Javier spotted something moving in the clearing below. Curious, he swooped down and, to his surprise, noticed a group of young birds, still inexperienced, trying to fly. They hopped from branch to branch, but their insecurity held them back. Javier decided to watch, his instincts as a protector stirring within him. Suddenly a shadow darted swiftly overhead. A cunning predator, a hawk, was on the hunt for prey. "No, no, no!" Javier exclaimed, his heart racing at the sight of the hawk approaching. "They aren't ready!" He knew he had to act, but doubt assailed him. For a moment, he hesitated, recalling his own inexperience. The hawk was closing in fast, and despair took hold of Javier. What if I fail? What if I get hurt? But in that instant, Inés's words echoed in his mind. True strength lies not only in skill, but in the courage to protect the vulnerable. Inspired by that wisdom, Javier took a deep breath. "I have to do this," he murmured to himself, deciding that he could not allow those innocent birds to become victims. He flew toward the group, his wings beating with determination. "Hey you need to hide," he shouted, using all his vocal power. The young birds looked up at him, confused and scared. "Quick, climb to the higher branches," Javier continued, gesturing with his wings. "The hawk is coming." In a flurry, the birds began to move, but hesitation still dominated them. Javier knew he had to do more than just shout. He positioned himself between them and the hawk, his presence imposing and confident. "You have to trust me. I will distract him." His voice sounded firm, even as adrenaline surged within him. Then, with a burst of energy, Javier soared toward the hawk, which had already fixed its gaze on the young birds. "Hey, up here!" he shouted, flapping his wings hard to create wind and draw the predator's attention. The hawk turned, surprised by Javier's audacity. "You're not going to catch those chicks so easily," Javier challenged, flying in circles and zigzags, trying to outsmart the hawk. The predator, irritated, began to chase him. Javier felt his heart race with adrenaline, but at the same time, a new sense of control enveloped him. He recalled Inez's lessons about using cunning instead of brute force. With each maneuver, he grew more confident, aware that he was making a difference. "Come on, young ones, it's time to fly," he shouted to the birds, who, realizing the situation, began to move toward the higher branches. "Focus, use the updrafts to help you." Javier, still in the thick of the struggle with the hawk, watched as the young birds started to take off, one by one, climbing to the safety of the trees. Finally, in a bold move, Javier made a quick dive, the hawk following closely behind. With a skillful maneuver, he shot upward sharply, causing the hawk to lose its direction. "Now quickly, hide," Javier ordered, as the hawk, confused, tried to regain its composure. With Javier's courage and cunning, the young birds managed to find refuge in the higher branches, safe from the threat. Javier, though exhausted, felt a wave of pride wash over him. He had faced down a predator and protected those who could not defend themselves. Inez's words resonated in his mind. True strength comes from unity and love for nature. And in that moment, he knew he was becoming a true guardian of the forest. Javier hovered in the air, surveying the forest that spread out below him like a vibrant carpet of greens and browns. The sun shone, filtering through the leaves, and a gentle breeze caressed his feathers. It was a perfect day to fly, and he felt the adrenaline coursing through his veins. Inez's lessons still echoed in his mind, each word a reminder of what it meant to be a true hunter, but also a protector of the forest. As he glided, his eyes fixed on a group of young birds playing near a bush. However, as he approached, he noticed a threatening shadow moving among the trees. A cunning predator, a hawk known for attacking unsuspecting chicks, was circling, its cold, calculating gaze focused on the unguarded birds. "No, no, no, they can't be caught," Javier thought, concern growing in his chest. He knew that courage was one of the qualities Inez had taught him, but he also understood the importance of acting wisely. He took a deep breath and remembered his mentor's words. True strength is not just about flying fast or being fierce, but about protecting those who are vulnerable. Determined, Javier swooped down, diving toward the young birds. "Hey everyone, we need to move now," he shouted, his voice firm yet encouraging. The birds, startled, looked up. "What's happening, Javier?" one of them asked, innocence shining in its eyes. "A hawk is nearby," he replied, keeping a close eye on the approaching shadow. "We need to hide. Quickly, follow me." The young birds didn't hesitate. Javier led them to a safe spot, a small hollow among the roots of an ancient tree. "Get in here, stay close and be quiet," he instructed, his voice low as he scanned the surroundings, alert to any movement. As they hid, Javier felt a wave of responsibility wash over him. He was no longer just a dreaming hawk. Now, he was a leader, a protector. "Everyone," he whispered, "if we act quickly and together, we can fool the hawk." "How are we going to do that?" asked one of the birds, fear shining in their eyes. "We'll use our speed and agility. As soon as the hawk gets close, you all fly to one side, and I'll go to the other. He won't know where to look," Javier explained, his mind racing with plans. The young birds nodded, confident in his plan. They knew Javier had learned from the best mentor and were ready to trust him. "We're ready," said one of the birds, determination in their voice. As the hawk approached, Javier prepared himself. He glanced at the group and with a nod shouted, "Now!" In a synchronized movement, they all flew in different directions, scattering like leaves in the wind. The hawk, caught off guard, hesitated for a moment, its eyes darting from side to side. Javier, seizing the opportunity, dove quickly toward the predator. "Hey, up here," he shouted, drawing the hawk's attention. The hawk turned, focusing on Javier, who flew with surprising agility. "That's right, come get me." He performed acrobatic maneuvers, swooping up and down, making the hawk veer off course while the young birds escaped safely. "Come on, Javier, you can do it!" shouted one of the birds, their voice filled with excitement and hope. Javier felt a surge of confidence. He was doing it. He was protecting those who needed him. With one last bold move, he dove down, forcing the hawk to swerve once more, and in doing so, he managed to lose it. Frustrated and confused, the predator decided it was time to give up and flew off in search of another prey. Javier, still flying at high speed, returned to the group, where everyone awaited him with admiring looks. "You did it! You saved us!" exclaimed one of the young birds, their eyes sparkling with gratitude. "It was a team effort," Javier replied, his chest swelling with pride. "We all did this together." Inez, watching from a safe distance, smiled at the growth of her apprentice. Javier was no longer just a young hawk. He had become a true leader. And the forest, in turn, was becoming a safer and more united place, thanks to the courage and wisdom that began to blossom among the birds. The forest, vibrant and full of life, started to feel the presence of dark clouds gathering on the horizon. A new storm was approaching, and the wind whispered through the leaves, bringing a sense of foreboding that made the animals cluster together in small groups, seeking comfort in each other's company. Javier, now more confident and mature, observed the commotion with a watchful eye. He had learned the importance of unity and collaboration, and he knew this was the moment to put everything Inez had taught him into practice. "We need to prepare for the storm, friends," Javier exclaimed, his voice firm and determined. The birds gathering around him looked at him with expectation, admiring the transformation of the once timid and insecure young hawk. With a gesture of his wings, Javier called everyone to action. "Let's find a safe place to shelter together. We can't face this alone." Inez, watching from a distance, felt immense pride seeing her apprentice lead with such confidence. She knew that true strength lay in the unity and solidarity among the animals. "Javier, you're doing an excellent job," she said, approaching him. "But remember, wisdom also lies in listening and observing. Each of us has a role to play." The hawk nodded, understanding that leadership didn't just mean giving orders, but also listening to the needs and concerns of others. "Let's form groups and divide the tasks," he suggested. "Some can help find shelters. Others can gather food and water. Together, we will be stronger." The animals began to move quickly, breaking into small groups. Javier joined a group of smaller birds with the aim of finding a safe spot. "Let's head to that cave by the river," suggested a little swallow. "It's deeper and can protect us from the strong winds." "Great idea," Javier replied, feeling adrenaline rush through his feathers. They flew toward the cave, where other animals were already seeking refuge. The atmosphere was tense, but Javier and his friends' determination was contagious. Meanwhile, Inez flew high, observing the forest and the approaching clouds. She knew the storm could be fierce. "Unity is key," she murmured to herself, thinking of how all the animals had learned to help each other. "If they stay together, they'll be safer." Finally, the storm hit the forest. The winds howled, and the rain fell like arrows. But inside the cave, the animals were united, sharing stories and comfort. Javier, his claws firmly on the damp ground, looked around and realized the strength of community. "Remember that we are stronger together," he shouted, his voice echoing in the cave. "If something happens, don't hesitate to help each other." As the first gusts of wind began to hit the entrance of the cave, a small rabbit, trembling with fear, approached Javier. "What if something happens to us?" it asked, eyes wide with worry. Javier crouched down to its level and with a gentle look replied, "We are together, and together we will face this. Remember what we've learned. Resilience makes us stronger. If one of us falls, we will lift each other up. Don't worry, we are here." The animals united, forming a protective circle around the rabbit. Inez, flying in circles above the cave, felt a surge of emotion as she witnessed the solidarity among them. She knew that regardless of what would happen, the bond they had formed would be the key to their survival. As the storm reached its peak, the winds howled like a hungry wolf, but inside the cave, Javier and the others refused to be disheartened. They shared stories, exchanged nervous laughter, and encouraged each other. "Let's sing a song of the forest," suggested a squirrel, and soon everyone began to join in a gentle melody, their voices blending in harmony. The storm, fierce as it was, could not break the spirit that had formed among them. Javier looked at Inez, still soaring above the cave, and felt a wave of gratitude. He knew that with each lesson he had learned, he had become not just a better hunter, but a true protector of the forest and its inhabitants. Even amidst the storm, unity and friendship blossomed like never before. After the storm, Javier flew through the forest, his wings now strong and determined, reflecting the confidence he had gained throughout his journey. He looked around, admiring the renewed beauty of the forest, which, despite the challenges faced, seemed to radiate with new life. The trees, which had bent to the furious winds, now stood tall and majestic, as if they knew they had overcome yet another trial. But amid all this beauty, there was an unease in his heart. He knew that Inez, his mentor, was about to reveal a profound secret. "Javier!" Inez's voice echoed among the treetops, soft yet firm. The young falcon turned and saw the owl perched on a low branch, her large, wise eyes shining in the sunlight, filtering through the leaves. "Come to me. There's something you need to understand." Intrigued, Javier descended, landing gently beside her. "What is it, Inez? I feel something has changed, but I can't quite put my finger on it." Inez tilted her head, as if assessing the young falcon. "You've grown, Javier, not just in skill, but in wisdom. However, there's an aspect of your journey that you still don't fully grasp. Look around." Javier observed the forest, now alive with sounds and movement. Birds sang in harmony, small mammals scurried among the leaves, and the wind whispered ancient secrets. "All of this, it's beautiful, Inez, but how does it relate to me? You are a part of this, my young one." Inez spoke softly, but her words carried weight. "I am not just a mentor. I am the guardian of this forest, just as you can become. The knowledge I share is not mine alone, but belongs to all those who came before us. True strength comes from connection with nature and the unity of all beings that inhabit this place." Javier furrowed his brow, trying to understand. "You mean I can be a guardian too?" "Exactly." Inez smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "The forest needs leaders, those who understand that strength lies not just in the ability to fly or hunt, but in the capacity to protect and unite. You've already begun this journey. Your courage in saving the goldfinch and your leadership during the storm were significant steps. But I'm just a young falcon. I don't know if I'm ready for this." Javier hesitated, his wings trembling slightly. "What if I fail?" "We all have fears, Javier, but it is by facing our fears that we find our true strength." Inez replied, her tone reassuring. "Remember what you've learned. The forest is a community, and together we are stronger. The true essence of a guardian is to love and care for the forest and its inhabitants." Those words penetrated deep into Javier's heart. He looked around again, realizing the vitality that emanated from every corner of the forest. He could feel life pulsing, the interconnectedness among all beings. "So what should I do?" "First, you must gather the animals, share your experiences and knowledge, organize them, show them that unity is the key to survival." Inez guided, her gaze fixed on the young falcon. "You are already a leader, Javier. Now it's time to recognize that and take action." With a newfound sense of purpose, Javier nodded. "I will do that, Inez. The forest is our home, and we must protect it together." Inez smiled, and Javier felt a new flame ignite within him. He soared into the air, his feelings of insecurity dissipating like clouds in the wind. He called upon all the animals of the forest, and soon a colorful, vibrant group formed beneath the trees. "Friends," Javier called, his voice firm and clear. "Today we gather to remember that we are part of something greater. Inez taught me that strength doesn't lie only in our individual abilities, but in our unity. Together, we must protect our home and each other." The animals listened intently, and a wave of murmurs of agreement spread through the crowd. Javier looked at Inez, who watched with pride, knowing that her apprentice had become a true guardian of the forest. With everyone's support, Javier began to outline plans, share the knowledge he had gained, and unite the animal community. He realized that just like Inez, he too could be a beacon of wisdom and leadership. The forest was in his hands, and the connection he felt with each creature there grew stronger every day. And so, under the watchful and loving eyes of Inez, Javier became a guardian of the forest, bringing everyone together in harmony and giving life to a new chapter of respect and protection for nature. Sweet dreams, my little ones. Let the night carry you gently, and know that tomorrow I'll have more magical stories for you.